April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and in an effort to help protect you and yours, we have Lieutenant Christopher Helmick with the Fargo Police Department to talk about that. Welcome to the show this morning. How's it going?
Good morning. Thanks. It's going well.
That's good to hear. We often think of child abuse as children maybe getting kidnapped or something incredibly serious, but there are other ways that children can be abused that maybe we don't think of, and that might not be in plain sight. Can you talk about what some of those things might be?
Sure. Well, our team that investigates child crimes, typically what we're looking at is, we have the obvious physical abuse, but something that we see a lot more of, even locally, is sexual abuse. And our team spends a lot of time investigating those crimes. It can be, abuse by a family member or someone that's known to the family, or even some type of exploitation, child pornography, those types of things. So those are things that people probably don't typically think of, but we deal with a lot in our investigations.
And so some people might say, well, I don't see that happening, so it can't be happening around here, but you and I both know it is. So how can people be more aware of these types of things going on in their community?
Well, I think the big thing is, if they suspect something, to not hesitate to either call us, call social services, talk to the school. There's a lot of mandatory reporters that have to look into those allegations. And a lot of times people don't want to bother us, or they think, well, I don't really know what's going on, so I don't want to bother the police. But we will certainly look into any of those allegations. And social services, I know, does the same thing. And that's probably the biggest thing. And the other thing is just to be aware, if a child doesn't seem to be acting correctly, or maybe, something just doesn't seem right. It's, again, reaching out to either us or those other professionals to at least check into it and make sure everything's okay.
And so you kind of mentioned this a bit, maybe the kid isn't acting quite right. So what are some of the other warning signs that we all need to be looking out for?
Well, you have the obvious, bruising that seems a little out of place, or, kids always get bruised when they're playing or whatever. But, if there just seems to be happening on a regular basis, or seems to be a little bit more serious than, a bump, that's an obvious thing. But, also behavioral issues. If they're acting out, if they're quiet, just seem to be really reserved. And those things can be perfectly normal, but they also might be signs of something else happening. And when you put those things all together, especially, if you see a combination of those indicators, that could really be a concern. And that's something you want us to, or social services or whoever, to check out.
And sometimes this is happening by a parent or a guardian or a family member they live with, and it's behind closed doors. And that can be a really awkward thing for a lot of people to bring up or to look into. What would you advise people to do if they maybe think that something like that is happening with a parent and child or guardian and child?
Well, and again, it goes back to people don't want to bother, they don't want to be nosy, or they don't want to interject into people's private lives. But, we get calls all the time, for example, someone's living in an apartment and they hear a kid screaming, and they're concerned about it. It doesn't sound normal. So they call us and we go check it out and just make sure everything's okay there. And sometimes we can just tell right away that, it's just kids acting up. But again, it really goes back to that cliche that if you see something, say something. It's the same here. If you really suspect it, it doesn't mean anybody's going to jail. We're going to investigate it. Social services will look into it. We're going to make sure before we take any action on it, but we don't want to miss anything either, because we've probably all heard horror stories where a child has fallen through the cracks and something wasn't done and something serious has happened to that child, or the child has died because of that. We just don't want anything like that to happen.
Yeah, so trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right, let authorities know. All right, Lieutenant with the Fargo Police, thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you.
Coming up on today's show, we're going to have your daily dose of motivation as we head into the weekend.